Health Matters from ACTV 20 and in conjunction with Atwood Video Productions. Today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, and it involves another area of health that I think everybody needs to know a little bit more about. I want you to know that the majority of your personal experience in life is something that you're not even conscious of. And that part of you that helps with your emotional responses, your health, your expression, and who you are has to do with what we sometimes call the subconscious. But it also is a part of us that is evaluating what's going on all the time. So if we can tap that majority of our experience, we can make changes in our health that will be fantastic. So I have a guest today who has experience in helping in this field, and she is going to help us understand a little bit more how it works and why it works and what her experience has been. So I'd like to introduce Lynn Grilly. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And our show today is on EFT, also known as?
Tapping, meridian tapping. Most people are commonly call it tapping.
And if they look up emotional freedom technique, they might find
Thank you.
EFT.
Good point.
Emotional freedom technique. So does it mean, the name would be suggestive that perhaps if we do this technique, we wouldn't have emotions. I think that's kind of funny, but explain a little bit about what EFT is.
Okay.
And then your background, how you got into that.
EFT is basically, it was originally developed out of applied kinesiology, and I'll get into that in a little bit. It works with the energy meridians in the body. Basically, the premise is that negative emotions store in different areas of our body if they're not released, if we don't let them go. And the more traumatic and the longer ago it was, if it wasn't released, it's going to add to other emotions that we have, incidents that come up for us that will increase that particular energy in our body and leads to dis-ease in the body, which will cause eventually, if not released, disease. Different people, it's going to affect them in different ways.
Right.
One person might have gallbladder problems. One person might have ulcers. A variety of different.
Depending on where the emotion is stored.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of since I have experience in applied kinesiology, we look at the body processing emotions because, and it's not my theory, but quite a few experts believe that you don't have memory without an emotion.
Right.
So if the body experiences an emotion with a memory, that emotion needs to be processed, recognized, and then now we're on to the next thing.
Right. And it's amazing how powerful, once you understand a little bit about EFT, how amazing it is of clearing those energies out of the body, because what we're doing is focusing on a particular energy and tapping on meridians to release it. And we have guides that we use during the process to let us know how we're doing with removing it. So like I said, it was originally developed by Dr. Callahan, who was a psychologist back in 1980. And he had also been studying applied kinesiology. So he was familiar with some of the energy meridians in the body. And he had a particular client he'd been working with for quite a while. And she had a long history of having therapy from other psychologists and just could not bring herself, she couldn't heal. And so Dr. Callahan had been working with her for about 1.5 years. And she was in his office one day, and all of a sudden she said, I feel really sick to my stomach. And he knew it was a result of the emotion that she was dealing with this trauma. So all of a sudden he flashed on the meridians that he'd learned about in applied kinesiology, and he knew that under the eye was the stomach meridian. So he said, let's just try something a little different. She was so emotional, whatever, she's going to do what he says. And He said, just keep talking, but just start tapping here underneath your eye. And within a very short amount of time, she stopped tapping. And she said, gee, my stomach feels fine now. I feel perfectly fine. And she looked at him and she goes, you know, I'm not feeling that fear anymore. And it had to do with her fear of water. And he thought, no, this is too easy. This is way too easy. And so they had a pond, I think, or something in the office complex where his office was. So they walked out there, and sure enough, her complete fear of water was gone. She even stepped into the pond. And so at that point, he began to develop a very elaborate tapping method that's been simplified over the years to what we have today.
Right. Well, how did you get interested in the EFT yourself? I know your conversation with me, you had talked about at a very early age, you were interested in how to reach that subconscious. So give us your background.
Right. Yeah, I've always had leanings in that direction. And probably about 20 years ago, I happened on a book called Extraordinary Healing, and it presented this whole, it told how to do this tapping. So I started playing around with it. I thought, yeah, I got to try this. This was just different enough that I was naturally attracted to it. And I was amazed at some of the, things I was feeling moving out. Of course, we're like onions, so there's layers. And but some things I'd been dealing with just felt different. So I was fortunate enough a couple years later to take some classes on EFT and the method, and that was probably 2000. And since then, I have gone on to take other classes and now have certification in advanced EFT therapy. And it's amazing what they're building on and discovering just in the last 15 years since I took it. And it's incredibly powerful. I've started using some of these new techniques with my clients, and love the results that we're getting. Just amazing.
Well, I'm also familiar, and since we're talking about our unconscious and subconscious selves, that perhaps is this similar to hypnosis, or could you tell us a little bit about the difference in those two?
Absolutely. No, it is not like hypnosis. It is working with the energy in the body. So it's more energy work. A different method. There's some amazing energy therapies out there that are very healing, Reiki being one of them. This works more specifically on specific problems. It's more physiological, moving the energy. I know there will be times when I'm not getting the results with my client that I want. And because the energies in our body are electromagnetic, it could be they're dehydrated, so I'll give them a glass of water. We want to, water conducts electricity. So we want to be able to, get that energy moving. And I found that I had that happen where, the glass of water and all of a sudden things just started clearing.
Right.
I do in my practice, I find what is hugely beneficial and very, very, very effective is if I start out with my client working on their issue with the EFT. And then when we get it cleared, and we know that it's cleared, then I like to follow it up with a guided visualization that reinforces them moving in through their life without this fear anymore. Case in point, I had a client, stage fright. She was a songwriter and a singer, and she was terrified. She just could not get up and perform in front of people. At home, she was great in front of her family. So we did the EFT tapping around stage fright, and then followed it up with a very detailed guided visualization of her actually moving through a crowd, feeling comfortable, experiencing being on the stage, her relationship with the audience and the positive feedback, positive feelings, and so reinforced it with that. And I happened to run into her about a month later, and she said, I didn't think that worked until last Thursday. And she was at someplace in Old Town, and they started calling her to come up and perform. And she said, I was terrified. As soon as I stood up out of my chair and took like 2 steps, it was gone. I could not believe it. Well, that was what the guided visualization was. As she, made her way to the stage, the fear just turned to peace. So I love telling that story because it really gets across the power that this has to be able to help you in an easy way to experience healing so you can move past blocks in your life.
Right. Well, I read in a book someplace, fear is false evidence appearing real. And so when we come to that conclusion, sometimes our conscious efforts to overcome things are so insurmountable. We think, oh my gosh, I could never get up on stage. I could never talk in front of people. That would just be, and the power of that negative thought can literally be reversed into, I have so much stage presence and I have so much confidence. And it's just because of that, as you were saying, there's emotional blocks that occur because we've had experience in our life that terrified us. Maybe when we were 7 or 8 years old and we didn't have the tools to process those things. So it's lovely to have techniques. I know people have heard of hypnosis. That's powerful. That helps people address that subconscious. The visualization that you were talking about, it's kind of the same thing, but guiding people with more, more consciousness involved so they can connect those things together. And I love the fact that the tapping, from what I understand of it, is a way for the body to go back to those stored emotional areas and help to process them and say, well, now I have the tools, or now I have the time, or I have somebody I trust to guide me through that process.
Right, and I always give my clients it's called the recipe, the tapping, it's called the recipe. And I always make sure they leave with a 3-page handout that goes through everything we do, so that when something comes up, they can do it for themselves at home. They don't usually do that.
No?
Usually they will come back, they'll call me and say, I know I could do this myself, but it's so much easier when you guide me through it. And I think that's true for all of us. Sometimes our issues are so deep that we're almost afraid to confront them on our own. So we seek out someone that we trust in order to be able to take that next step.
Well, since you have talked about some of the cases that you've dealt with, I think it would be interesting for the audience just, and that's real important to understand that this is not psychoanalysis, this is not what perhaps a psychologist or psychiatrist would do, because those are more trying to help people connect their conscious experience with changes that they wish to make. But what you're doing and the techniques that we're talking about involve so much more power in the brain. And I don't know what the exact numbers are. I've heard like 90% of our experience is subconscious. Just sitting here, we have so many things that are trying to enter our consciousness, but we filter so much. And our filter is created by our experience.
And we don't realize where a lot of those filters come from because we don't take the time to stop and go, well, where did that come from? Maybe if you get someone that's, purposely trying to figure out why they react a certain way, then you might, but most of the time we don't. And I find with my clients that a lot of things going on in their lives that they can't move past actually has its basis when they're very young. 5, around that age. And it's usually something that happened that a parent or a teacher or someone of authority or an incident that happened And you know, when we're young, we don't process things the same way we do as when we're adults. So a lot of things, especially my weight loss clients, I'm working with one right now, we're doing a whole lot of EFT. And the interesting thing was that when we really addressed and we really talked about what the foundation of this weight problem was, it came from a really deep fear of starvation.
Oh my.
Really deep fear.
Well,
And
that's huge.
Huge.
There's a big part of our brain is still preoccupied with that.
Right. And so this started when she was very, very young. And you forget that. You don't realize that when you're 2 years old, you're afraid that you're not going to have enough food. Something probably happened to give her that experience or that fear. But once we cleared that, it's almost like dominoes. Once you get the main one cleared, you realize the others are, because a lot of that is more recent stuff that habits that you've developed out of protecting yourself from that fear. And it's amazing once that original fear is cleared, how much change you experience in so many areas of your life.
Right. The brain can then open up to saying, well, that's not a roadblock anymore. Then it can explore, it can reach out and say, what else am I capable of? And that's our human experience, is what's out there, what can I experience?
And the freedom that you feel when those fears, you start to remove those fears, like my client with the stage fright, how that altered her life. Now she not only can write and sing, she can perform, she can take it to the people, and she has a beautiful voice.
Great.
So
I wanted to help with an understanding of tapping that is addressing what are known as meridians. We haven't discovered this. It's been out for thousands of years. The understanding that the energy that travels through us is real, even though we can't taste it or smell it or feel it. It's there, and it's what animates us as living beings. So they've been mapped out to where specific meridians tend to hold certain emotions. And that's where the applied kinesiology, they took that from acupuncture and Oriental medicine. And then with that understanding, we realize, and especially on the head, the applied kinesiology considers the points on the head a connection to the brain.
Right.
So when you are helping people with the tapping, you're actually helping their brain say, this meridian, that emotion has need for attention.
Right.
And so then you're helping guide them through that process. So it's not like you can get a book and just start doing this and figure it out, because there's I think an element where having a guide is critical. Can you speak to that? I mean, I know you learned the EFT, but did you have experience with somebody helping you with that?
Yeah, when I was, one of the things, when I was taking the class, I went to school in Palo Alto to learn all the different techniques, modalities that I use in my practice. And I had realized that my father was staying with us. My father and I had a really sketchy background and had done a lot of healing over the years, but he could push my buttons like nobody could.
Sure.
And we're sitting at the dinner table. All weekend I had been in this class and I'd been working on it, and, learning it. And he said something at the table that should have brought up a whole lot of negative emotions, anger, resentment, whatever. And I looked at him, and all of a sudden, I started laughing, and I said, Dad, that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And then I caught myself, I thought, I didn't react to that. It was gone. The button was cleared that he could push. Yeah, it was amazing. And in class we worked with each other, and we got in groups and did that. And I've been using EFT with clients for years now. And I have to say, It's such a different concept. People that aren't familiar with it, had never heard of it. 95% of my clients are total skeptics.
Oh, yeah.
But they trust me, so they'll say, okay, we'll try it, see what happens.
It won't hurt.
It won't hurt.
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt you. Clear the energy. And I have had them literally call me like a week later, amazed that it actually worked. And then run into people that one really traumatic person I worked with on a really deep trauma, 6 months later, and she said, the memory is still there, but when it surfaces, there's no anger, frustration, that it's all gone.
Right.
And that's what they say about healing. The memories aren't going to go away. They're still going to be there, but there's no power behind them anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have a personal story, and then I'm going to let you tell us a couple more of your stories, because
Okay.
I think these are fascinating, and I know the audience is thinking, well, I wonder if that would help me. Well, for years, I was known in my family as the hothead. I had a temper that I would just come unglued for no reason, and I didn't know why. Maybe I just was thinking that was me. You know, I'm just a hothead. Don't push me. And I did go through the first steps of applied kinesiology. We learned some tapping techniques, and it came up. And I should mention that we also, in chiropractic school where I went, we did some blood tests, and I found my liver enzymes were high, and I always had a little tenderness underneath my rib cage. And we did this technique, and I found that the tapping connected me to an experience I had when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. Somebody had stolen a bicycle of mine. I found it. I was really angry that you know, somebody would take my bike, and I rode it home. It was icy out, and the bike went out from under me, and I hit my head, knocked me out. So when I came to, I remember my mother carrying me in, saying, "See what happens when you get angry?"
Oh.
And boy,
Yeah.
I had never remembered that until that moment. But after that, my sister, in fact, when she next saw me, she said, "You know, I've been pushing you just to see, you know, as siblings do."
Yeah.
And she said, "Where's that angry guy that used to be here?" And I didn't realize it, but yeah, I don't fall
Yeah.
off the handle anymore. And so that was my personal experience, and led me to more exploration of this deep-seated healing that's very possible. So could you give us a couple more examples of the people who have come to you? Don't mention names.
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, one that really stands out is one of my clients couldn't figure out why every relationship they'd had in the last 10 years was a repeat of a very traumatic breakup that she'd had with someone that she had been with for years. And in the course of talking, and I spend a lot of time talking to my clients, I really need to understand what's going on underneath. And the other thing is, I'm not just listening to their words. We express so much by our facial expression, our body language, our tone of voice. So I'm really watching that, and I find so many times people don't realize what comes out of their mouth. It's like, did you hear what you just said? That's huge. Anyway, so as we're talking, come to find out, she had never gotten over this person. So every single person that she had been with she was trying to replicate this person. So, and she was one of my clients that was in the 95% skeptical category. We went through it just to clear that situation. And this was a person that I would see on a regular basis. And the next time I saw her, she said, "It's gone." And the relationship that she was in currently, that she had spent a lot of time complaining about, she said, "I'm not having those issues anymore. We're getting along great. And the stuff isn't coming up. And oh my gosh, this is so powerful." And I love it when I hear back, because so many times I'll work with people, and then, you know, I won't hear from them unless I run into them or, you know. So I love getting that positive feedback. So relationships, the other thing about EFT is it works on physical ailments.
Right.
There's a lot of stories out there. I have not personally worked with people on medical, But when I was taking the advanced class, the lady that taught the class talked about she had fibromyalgia. She also had not fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome, and totally cleared it. She was also celiac, so she had the gluten intolerance. She was able to clear all of her food sensitivities, and it totally, made a difference. And so, even when you're starting to get a headache or something, you can use it because there's some tension going on there. Feel yourself coming down with the flu, and you go through the recipe, and it's amazing what it does for physical ailments.
Well, you have an amazing ability to help people through this, but you've also mentioned to me that you work with other professionals.
I do.
And so this is not really a substitute for psychoanalysis or going to their physician because of an ache or a pain, but I did fail to mention that pain that I had under my ribcage went away once my anger issue was dealt with, because it was on the liver meridian.
Yep.
That was what they found out.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to get a hold of you, would it be best if they go to your website? Is that just for information, or how would they get more information about what you do?
They could go to my website, and you want me to tell you what that is?
Yeah, go ahead. It's on the show.
Okay, thhhc.biz. Under contact, you can go in and you'll have all my contact information. Email me, call me is perfectly fine. My office is on High Street in downtown, and pretty easy to find over by Huber Property Management. It's my point to tell people how to get there.
Is there information on your website they could learn a little more about EFT? Because you can go to Google, but you can also have a million different things that might lead you astray.
Right, and I do. I have the recipe, the tapping points. It doesn't go into a lot of information, but it does show the tapping points. And it's a lot more complicated than just tapping. Phrases to say and checking for the intensity of the emotion is all involved in the process.
Yeah, in my experience, there's a left brain, right brain issues that you have to address.
And
some of that.
Usually I will test for that to make sure that we've got the energy flowing correctly through the body. If it's, sometimes we could go through stress, really bad stress, and get our systems switched around. So I test for that, make sure everything is set, make sure you're hydrated, and then we go through the tapping, which I teach. I teach my clients how to do that, and so they can do it for themselves.
Well, in my experience, and I think this is probably true of all situations, you either are aware of physical imbalances, ailments in your body that keep reoccurring, or you're aware of reactions like with me, it was the anger, but with other people, maybe some other thing that triggers off, like you were saying, little buttons that people push. These are clear indications that the body is holding on to something that may not be healthy. So it would be in people's best interest to try to find a way to help that, rather than using self-medication or even drugs that would basically just help hide the problem and not get to the real basis of what's causing those imbalances and that ailment.
And if I recognize during the course of our conversation that this isn't an issue that I am really equipped to deal with, I will refer them over. I'll let them know, and I'll refer them to someone that can. And it doesn't happen very often, but it has been known to happen. So I won't attempt anything that I don't feel completely confident in doing.
Well, that makes me comfortable too. So I want to thank you very much for coming to the show, sharing with us. It's been fantastic. I think the information will help a lot of people. Thank you again for coming, Lynn Grilly.
Thank you, Dr. Parks.
And good day.